Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I am so glad you're here with us today because, quite frankly, I think we are about to save some sanity.
That's a big promise.
It is, but I think we can deliver. We are continuing our marathon through, well, the human condition, specifically our Building a Human series. This is episode 17, and if you've been following along, you know we've been dissecting the hidden mechanics of how children grow, learn, and just exist. But today feels personal.
It does feel personal, and I would say urgent.
Urgent is the right word, because today we're talking about silence. And before we even get into the source material, just want to, acknowledge the reality of the room for a second.
Please.
If you're listening to this, you might be a parent, a teacher, or just a human being who lives in the 21st century. And our world is loud.
Relentlessly loud.
It is relentlessly, aggressively loud. And if you have kids, whether it's a classroom of 30 or just 2 in the living room, that specific kind of sensory overload where the noise level it hits an 11 and your brain starts to short circuit.
It's a physiological response. We are not designed for constant, chaotic auditory input. It triggers cortisol. It triggers the fight or flight response.
Exactly. And that is usually where the fight comes in. We shout, we snap, we demand quiet. But what we're going to explore today, based on the incredible source material from Maria Montessori's The Secret of Childhood, is that we have been doing it all wrong.
Completely wrong.
We're going to look at the silence exercise.
Okay.
But before we dive into the mechanics, and we're going to get very technical today, I just want to give a massive shout out to the partners making this deep dive possible.
Of course.
This episode is brought to you by the collaboration between the Al-Mahaba Foundation, that's Love for All and Service to All, and the Dar el-Khalima Publishing House.
And it's such a wonderful collaboration, really, because their mission aligns so perfectly with what we're discussing. The Al-Mahaba Foundation focuses on service, but not just service in the sense of charity. It's about service to the soul, service to human potential. And Dar el-Khalima is preserving this wisdom so we can actually use it. It's not just some old book on a shelf.
And that phrase, love for all, service to all, is going to come up in a big way later when we talk about what it actually means to serve a child's development. But let's start with the problem, the hook, as we call it, the parenting paradox.
Paradox of silence.
Right. So here's the scenario. You're in a room, the kids are bouncing off the walls, the energy is frantic, it feels like a riot is brewing. As an adult, your instinct, almost your biological imperative, is to overpower that chaos.
You have to regain control.
Yes, and you think the way to do that is to be louder than the noise. You shout, quiet down, or be silent. Or, my personal favorite, if I hear one more sound, no iPad.
We treat silence as a command. We treat it as a form of submission. I am the big, powerful adult, and I am ordering you, the small child, to cease your behavior. It is an act of will imposed from the outside.
And does it work? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Does it really work?
For a moment, maybe. You might startle them into silence. You might scare them into silence for 10 seconds. But what kind of silence is that?
It's a tense silence.
It's a holding your breath silence. It is not peaceful. It is just suppressed noise. It's like putting a lid on a boiling pot. The pressure is still there.
And usually 30 seconds later, the lid blows off again, and it's even louder this time.
Exactly, because you haven't changed the state of the child. You have just paused the behavior. What Montessori proposes in the sources we are looking at today is a complete inversion of this dynamic. She argues, and this was a truly radical discovery, that children do not hate silence.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive. I mean, my experience suggests they are noise-generating machines.
It sounds impossible. We think of children as engines of noise, but she found that they actually crave silence. They love it. But, and this is the crucial but, they love it only when it is not a command. They love it when it is an achievement.
An achievement. Wow. Okay, that is a fascinating reframe. So we're moving from silence as obedience to silence as conquest.
Or silence as a game. Silence as a temple of peace that they build themselves. The goal isn't just to shut up. The goal is to transform the environment into a sanctuary where the child can actually feel their own existence.
Feel their own existence. That's a heavy concept for a Tuesday morning. But I want to get there. I want to understand how we get from a riotous classroom to a temple of peace without using fear. And the source material starts with a story. It's an origin story, really.
It is the origin story of the silence exercise. And like so many scientific breakthroughs, it happened almost by accident. It wasn't planned. It was an observation.
Okay, set the scene for us. Where are we?
We are in one of the early children's houses, the Casa dei Bambini. It's the early 1900s. You have a room full of children, probably varying ages from maybe 3 to 6. And the energy is what you'd expect. Busy, active, loud.
The normal, beautiful chaos.
Exactly. And then Montessori enters the room. But she isn't alone. She's carrying a baby.
A 4-month-old infant.
Right. Now think about the energy of a 4-month-old. Not when they are crying, but when they are calm and swaddled.
It's a different frequency entirely. It's like a little ball of zen. They're just observing. There's a heaviness to their calm, a presence.
A profound stillness. That's the word she uses. So, Montessori holds this baby up to the class. Now, the typical adult, the typical teacher would say, "Look at the baby, isn't she cute?" Or, "Let's all say hello to the baby."
Right, something to generate more excitement.
But Montessori doesn't do that. She acts like a scientist, drawing attention to a phenomenon. She says, "Look how quiet she is."
She directs their attention to the state of being, not the object.
Precisely. She points out the baby's breathing, how soft it is, how the baby's feet aren't kicking, how the baby is completely content in this absolute stillness. And then she drops the bomb. She issues the challenge.
The spiritual challenge, as the source calls it.
She looks at these older, rambunctious kids who are probably 4, 5, 6 years old, and she says, effectively, "I don't think you can do it."
I don't think any of you can be as still as she is.
It's just brilliant, isn't it?
It is reverse psychology 101. It's what you do when you want a kid to eat broccoli. Oh, this is grown-up food. You probably wouldn't like it.
It is, but it cuts deeper than just a trick. It taps into what psychologists call competence motivation. Children are constantly told what they can't do. They're too small to reach the shelf. They're too clumsy to hold the glass. They're too young to understand. Their lives are, in many ways, defined by incompetence relative to adults.
So when she says, "I don't think you can do this," she isn't giving an order. She is questioning their ability.
Exactly. She is challenging their mastery. If she had said, "Be quiet like the baby," that's an order. Orders trigger resistance. It's an external demand. But by saying, "I bet you can't," she triggers ambition.
It becomes internal.
The desire to prove her wrong is a powerful internal motivator. She shifts the locus of control from her, the adult, to them, the children.
It becomes their project. I'll show you. I can be quieter than that baby.
Precisely. The motivation is now intrinsic. And the result, as described in the text, was immediate. It wasn't a gradual settling down. It was a sudden collective drop into stillness. The source says they didn't just stop talking. They controlled their bodies. They adjusted their breathing. They froze.
And the source mentions something incredible here, that they got so quiet they could hear their own hearts beating.
Just stop and think about that. Think about the level of ambient silence required to hear your own heart.
I don't think I heard my own heart beating in years, unless I've just sprinted up a hill or I'm having a panic attack. To hear it while sitting still, that means the room had to be essentially anechoic. No shuffling feet, no coughs, no whispers.
Nothing. And that is the discovery. Montessori realized that silence isn't just not talking. Silence is a power. It's a substantive thing. It's not the absence of noise. It is the presence of profound collective control. And once they achieved this state, something else happened. Something happened to their senses.
This is the part I really want to dig into. The sensory journey. Our outline calls it a software upgrade for the senses. And I love that description. What is actually happening biologically or neurologically when a group of children goes this deep into silence?
Well, to understand this, we have to talk a little bit about how the human brain processes information.
Yeah.
We all have a mechanism called sensory gating. Basically, your brain is a filter. It has to be.
Right. If we heard everything all the time, we'd go insane.
We would be completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So right now, while you're listening to me, there are probably a dozen sounds around you that your brain is actively deleting. The hum of the air conditioner, the distant traffic, the rustle of your own clothes.
I don't hear any of that until you mention it.
Exactly. Your brain inhibits that input. It gates it out so you can focus on my voice. But when you engage in the silence exercise, when you consciously stop your motor functions, you stop moving, you stop talking, you send a signal to your brain that the foreground activity has stopped.
So the brain says, okay, nothing urgent happening up front. Let's open the gates.
That's a great way to put it. The inhibition lifts. The gain on the microphone goes up. The children in that room started to experience the world in high definition. The source lists specific, very subtle things they began to hear.
A ticking of a clock.
Which is usually just white noise, background hum. But suddenly, it becomes a rhythmic, mechanical percussion in the room. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It becomes a presence.
The song of a bird?
And not a bird on the windowsill. The text is clear. A bird far away. They could not only hear it, but they could locate it in space. They could perceive its
The
distance.
rustle of a leaf.
Just think about the sensitivity required for that. To hear a single leaf moving against another leaf outside the window, this is what we mean by a software upgrade. Their auditory cortex wasn't physically changing, but their attention was. They were channeling all that incredible energy that usually goes into running and shouting into pure perception.
It sounds like a form of meditation or mindfulness,
Yeah.
what people spend years trying to learn to do.
It is exactly that. But for a child, it's perhaps even more profound because they're usually so sensory seeking. They're touching everything, tasting everything, shouting to hear their own voice. To reverse that flow, to become purely sensory receiving, is a massive shift in their whole state of being.
And the text makes a distinction here between suppression and focus. I think this is so crucial for the parents listening, because when I yell, "Shut up," I am suppressing them. I'm crushing their energy. But this feels completely different.
It's the difference between holding back a flood and channeling a river. When you suppress a child, you are fighting their nature. You create tension. That's why the silence after a scolding feels so heavy or angry.
Yeah, you can feel it in the air.
But here, the energy isn't being stopped, it's being redirected. It takes an immense amount of energy and concentration to sit absolutely still. Every muscle is engaged in not moving.
Right. It's active, not passive. You're actively being still.
It's intensely active. The child is vibrating with concentration. And because it is active, because it is a challenge they are meeting, it leads to a feeling of deep satisfaction. The source uses that beautiful phrase. It is a moment where the soul feels its own existence.
The soul feels its own existence. Okay, let's unpack that. It sounds poetic, almost religious. But is there a psychological truth there? What does that mean for a 4-year-old?
There is a deep psychological truth there. Think about it. When we are constantly reacting to external stimuli, video games, TV, parents giving orders, siblings fighting, our sense of self is externalized.
Yeah.
We are defined by what we are reacting to.
I am the person who is angry at my brother. I am the person who wants that toy.
Exactly. But when all of that stops, when the external world fades into the background and you are left only with the ticking of the clock and the beating of your own heart, what's left?
You're left with yourself.
You are left with the I, the observer. For a child whose ego and sense of self are still forming, this moment of, I am here and I am peaceful and I am in control, is incredibly grounding. It connects them to a source of peace that is inside them, not outside them.
Which is a resource they can go back to. It's not dependent on a toy or a parent's mood.
Exactly. It builds an internal sanctuary, a place they can retreat to.
Okay, I am sold on the why. I think everyone listening is probably nodding along saying, yes, I want my kids to have an internal sanctuary, and also, I would really like 20 minutes of quiet.
They're not mutually exclusive.
They're not. But now we have to get tactical. The source outlines the mechanics of the silence exercise. I want to go through this step by step because it seems like the details really, really matter. It's not just sit still. It's a protocol. It's a ritual.
It is absolutely a protocol. The ritual is what gives it power. If you just say, let's all sit still for a minute, it will fail. You have to build the drama. You have to build the structure around it.
So, step one, the setup. What does the teacher or the parent in our case do?
The first step is what we might call the abdication of power.
The abdication of power. That sounds very dramatic.
It is. In a traditional classroom, the teacher is the center of gravity. They stand at the front. They command the room with their presence. In the silence exercise, the teacher physically moves away.
Where do they go?
To a far corner. Sometimes, Montessori teachers will even stand in the doorway or slightly outside the room, half hidden from view.
So they're removing the visual anchor of authority. They're no longer the focal point.
They're creating distance. And that distance is essential for the acoustic challenge that comes next. The room is often darkened slightly, maybe the shutters are closed to lower the visual stimulation. The children are sitting, they know the game is about to start, the anticipation builds.
And then comes the whispering game.
The teacher begins to call the children, one by one, but she doesn't use her normal voice. She uses a whisper.
Now, I've heard teachers whisper before, and it's usually just a raspy shout, "Hey, you, come here." Is that what we were talking about?
No, that is a stage whisper. That is cheating. We are talking about a true whisper, a sound that is barely on the edge of perceptibility. A wisp of a sound. Julia, Antonio.
Okay, let's look at the physics of that for a second. A whisper has very low energy, very low decibels, very low frequency. For that sound to travel from the doorway all the way to the back of the classroom,
The medium, the air in the room must be absolutely still. If there is any ambient noise, feet shuffling, a little cough, someone whispering to their neighbor, the signal is lost. The name Antonio physically will not reach Antonio's ears.
So the game mechanics themselves enforce the silence. It's not a rule from the teacher, it's a rule of physics. If the class isn't quiet enough, the game breaks.
Exactly. It gamifies the collective responsibility. Antonio wants to hear his name so he can take his turn. The other children want Antonio to hear his name so the game can continue and they can eventually get their turn. So suddenly you have 30 children collaborating to lower the noise floor of the room to absolute zero.
It creates a conspiracy of silence. They are all in on it together.
That is a perfect way to put it. It is a conspiracy. They are conspiring together to create a medium where a whisper can travel. It's a collective scientific experiment.
So Antonio hears his name, he perks up, he's been chosen. Now comes the physical challenge. What does he have to do?
He has to stand up, leave his chair, and walk across the room to the teacher. But the rule is he cannot make a single sound.
And we are talking about toddlers and young children here. Their natural state of movement is, well, it's chaotic.
It's a series of controlled collisions. They stomp, they drag their feet, they bump into tables. To move silently requires a complete override of their natural motor patterns. It's a massive act of will.
The source mentions walking on tiptoes.
Yes. But think about what that actually entails physically. To walk on tiptoes without thudding down, you have to engage your core muscles for stability. You have to engage your calves. You have to use your glutes to control the descent of the foot. You can't just plop it down.
It's a full body workout. It's like a balance beam routine.
It is. It requires incredible proprioception. That's the sense of knowing exactly where your body is in space. You have to look at the floor. Is there a creaky board there? Is there a chair leg I need to avoid? You have to place the foot, test the weight, and then shift your balance slowly. It is a high-level athletic endeavor for a 4-year-old.
And all of this is happening while 30 pairs of eyes are watching you.
That adds the element of performance. The other children aren't just waiting passively. They're the audience. They are the judges. They are watching the technique. Did he make a sound? Did his chair scrape? No. Wow.
This turns the waiting period, which is usually the recipe for disaster in a classroom, that's when the trouble starts. It turns it into an active period. The waiters are engaged in active, focused observation.
Exactly. They are participating by witnessing. And this builds social coordination on an incredible level. The child who's walking is walking carefully out of respect for the group's silence. The group is waiting silently out of respect for the walker's concentration. It's a beautiful feedback loop of mutual respect.
It is a masterclass in social coordination. You know, it reminds me of the feeling when you walk into a great library or a cathedral, you don't run and scream in a cathedral. Not because a security guard is going to tackle you, but because the space itself demands reverence. You instinctively match your energy to the space.
And in this case, the children built the cathedral. They created that sacred atmosphere themselves. That is why it is so powerful. It isn't imposed on them. It is generated by them.
I love that image. They were the architects of their own temple of peace.
Yeah.
But now I have to play the skeptic for a minute.
Please do.
Because I'm reading the source material here. And there's a section that, frankly, I find hard to believe. It just goes against everything I know about, well, kids.
I think I know where you were going. The reward. The candy.
The reward, the candy. We live in a behavioralist world. You do something good, you get a treat. You sit still for 5 minutes, you get a sticker. You finish your veggies, you get dessert. So Montessori runs this incredible experiment. The kids achieve this Zen-like state of peace, and she decides to reward them.
She does. She acts like a typical adult of her time and of our time. She thinks, they did a good job, I should give them a prize. So she brings out sweets. Chocolates, candies, the ultimate external reward.
Oh, yeah?
And they refuse them.
Okay, come on, seriously.
Yeah.
I have a nephew. If I offer him chocolate, he is taking the chocolate. There is no scenario where he says, no, thank you, uncle. I am too full of spiritual peace to accept this confectionery. Is this real, or is this Montessori myth-making?
It does sound like hagiography, doesn't it? Like a story about a saint. But we have to look at the context and the psychology of that specific moment. It wasn't that they suddenly didn't like chocolate. It was that the chocolate was a lower-order pleasure compared to what they were feeling.
You are saying the dopamine hit of the sugar was less valuable than the serotonin of the silence? Is that what's happening?
Think about the phrase the source uses. They felt the candy would break the magic.
Break the magic.
What is that magic? It is the feeling of internal integrity, of being calm, capable, and connected to the world, in a heightened way. It is a high vibration state. Scrambling for candy, unwrapping it, the noise, the chewing. It's a chaotic, low vibration state. It creates noise, it creates greed, it creates competition. In that specific, powerful moment, the children recognize that the candy was a downgrade.
That is profound. It
Yeah.
challenges the entire premise of how we motivate kids. We assume they are purely hedonistic, just little beings seeking the next sugar rush or the next toy. But this suggests there is a hunger for peace, for mastery.
It suggests that the internal reward is infinitely more powerful and satisfying than the external reward. The feeling of mastery, of self-control, of building that sanctuary that is actually sweeter than the candy.
And this connects directly to the Al-Mahaba Foundation's philosophy, doesn't it? We mentioned love for all, service for all at the beginning.
It absolutely does. The foundation teaches that true service isn't just giving physical gifts. It isn't just handing out metaphorical candy. True service is helping a human being find their own internal resource.
Let's them build that sanctuary inside themselves.
Yes. If you can teach a child how to access this state of silence, how to calm themselves, how to listen deeply, how to find peace in a chaotic world, you have served them for life. You have given them a tool they can use when they are anxious teenagers, when they are stressed adults, when they are grieving seniors. You have given them access to themselves.
That is the ultimate service. It's empowerment, not just charity. But it requires a huge shift in us, the adults. And this is the final piece of the puzzle, isn't it? We have to change our role in the room.
We have to stop being the police officer.
The police officer, I know that role well. You, stop that. Be quiet. Sit down. Patrolling the perimeter.
The police officer is reactive. They patrol the border of behavior. They punish infractions. It is exhausting for the adult, and it breeds resentment in the child. And crucially, it only works when the police officer is in the room.
As soon as the cop turns the corner, the speed limit is ignored again. The chaos returns.
Exactly. The behavior isn't internalized. We need to shift from being a police officer to being a guide.
What's the difference? What does a guide do?
A police officer commands. A guide invites. The guide says, "Look at this incredible path I've found. It leads to a quiet, magical place. I bet you can walk it." The guide models the behavior. In the silence exercise, the teacher doesn't just watch. The teacher whispers. The teacher tiptoes. The teacher is part of the silence.
So it's a shared experience, not a top-down imposition of will.
It is co-creation. You are building the silence together. And that changes the relationship from adversarial me versus you to collaborative. It's us together creating this piece.
Okay, so for the parents listening who are thinking, okay, this sounds great in a perfectly curated Montessori school in 1910, but how do I do this in my living room with a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old on a rainy Saturday? How do we adapt this?
You don't need the specialized classroom. You just need the mindset. The first, most powerful thing you can do is stop shouting. If the noise level is high, drop your own voice to a whisper.
It feels so counterintuitive. They're screaming, so your instinct is to scream over them to be heard.
But if you whisper, you change the entire dynamic. You create a vacuum. You force them to stop screaming to hear you. You create curiosity. Then issue the challenge. Say, "I have a secret. Come here." Then whisper, "I bet we can't walk from the sofa to the kitchen without the floor creaking once."
Make it a conspiracy, a secret mission.
Exactly. There's a sleeping giant in the house. We have to be silent ninjas. Frame it as a skill to be mastered, a game to be won, not a rule to be followed.
And focus on the sensory aspect of it.
Yes. Once they're quiet, use that moment.
Whoa! Listen, can you hear the fridge humming? Can you hear the car passing by outside? Validate their super hearing. Make them feel that by being quiet, they have unlocked a superpower.
You have Spider-Man hearing now. Exactly. You're building their self-esteem and their self-regulation at the exact same time. And as a bonus, you get a quiet house. Everyone wins.
It really is a win-win. We get peace, they get mastery, and we all avoid that cortisol spike from yelling.
And we might just learn something ourselves. We adults need this exercise just as much, if not more, than the children. When was the last time you sat still enough to hear a leaf rustle?
That is a conviction right there. I think I need to practice this tonight after the kids are in bed.
We all do. Our world trains us out of it.
This has been such a deep dive. We started with a noisy room and we ended up in a spiritual sanctuary. It's amazing how Montessori takes these simple, everyday things, silence, walking, and reveals the profound developmental engine underneath.
She saw the child not as an empty vessel to be filled with facts, but as a spiritual embryo that is actively unfolding. And she saw that our job as adults is just to clear the obstacles. And sometimes the noise is the biggest obstacle.
The spiritual embryo. I love that. Now, speaking of unfolding to developing, I have to ask about our next deep dive. Because you dropped a hint earlier about writing. And usually we think of writing as this tedious thing we force kids to learn. Hand drills, tracing letters, total boredom.
We do. We teach it painfully and mechanically. But next time, we're going to talk about the explosion of writing.
Explosion. That
What?
implies it happens all at once, suddenly.
It does. Montessori observed a phenomenon where children who had not been taught to write in the traditional sense through drills suddenly, spontaneously, burst into writing. Whole words, whole sentences. It came out of them like a dam breaking.
Wait, hold on. They wrote before they could read. That seems backwards.
They wrote before they could read books. They learned to construct language before they could deconstruct it from a page. It's one of the most astonishing things in her entire body of work. It is considered by many to be one of the only true miracles of education.
That sounds absolutely wild. I cannot wait to get into that. But for today, I want to leave our listeners with that challenge. The next time the chaos rises in your home or classroom, don't be the police officer. Be the guide. Lower your voice. Issue the challenge. See if you can build a little temple of peace in your own kitchen.
And listen for the heartbeats, yours and theirs.
Listen for the heartbeats. If you want to dive deeper into the source material, and I highly, highly recommend you do, the book is The Secret of Childhood, you can find these resources through the Dar el Kalima Library. Just go to darelkalima.com. They are doing the incredibly important work of keeping this wisdom alive for all of us.
It is wisdom that builds humans, after all.
Indeed. Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. Remember our motto, love for all.
And service for everyone.
We'll see you next time.